What's up, YouTube? Brad Hoover from Rants here. Alright, so the Eternals over their first weekend actually nabbed the second lowest MC movie debut of basically the last 15 years. So it's no wonder that you would see something like Forbes already coming out with the 5 reasons why that the Eternals failed. And it wasn't because of anything movie related. It was more of outside forces, characters not being known and household names, all of this other kind of stuff. I feel like this movie was meant to always be a middle of the road kind of movie. And I say that with the utmost respect to the movie, a movie that I personally didn't find terrible. I didn't find it necessarily great either, but I thought it has some really interesting aspects. I felt like it should have, could have, would have been a better movie if maybe they would have had lesser characters, maybe not done so many flashbacks back and forth. I feel like that would have actually been saved a lot of time for this movie, where that they could have enjoyed these characters for what they were, enjoyed the relationships, which were actually pretty good in that movie, enjoyed them for what they were or what they could have been, flesh it out a little bit more, and I felt like you would have actually had a good movie. I won't go so far as say a great movie, but a good, interesting movie and a great addition to the MCU. Instead, what we got was a lot of mishmash, where it felt like the director wasn't necessarily knowing what it wanted, what that particular director wanted to do with the film. Did it want to be an action film? Did it want to be MCU film? Did it want to be, kind of one of those films like a documentary, kind of just watching people grow, as, they progress over the years? There was a lot of different things that this film seemed to want to portray and wasn't really clear about which direction it technically wanted to go. Now, I'm not one of those YouTubers that are just going completely and totally hate on it. I've seen that way too much. I don't want the MCU to fail. I don't want Marvel itself to fail either. I do feel like Marvel did do some kind of false advertising. They pushed this big LGBTQ moment. Really, it was just kind of a minor moment. I kind of felt like they overplayed their hand when it come to that, and I felt like, if you were looking forward to that moment, I felt like you would probably be a little bit disappointed in it. As far as the rest of the movie is concerned, you know what? It was one of those movies that it told you who you supposed to be interested in, and not really necessarily why. And I felt like that was the biggest problem with this movie. When it didn't lead you to enjoy the characters and follow your own path. It told you where it wanted you to go, and not necessarily why. That was my biggest problem with this movie. But let's go into why Forbes actually thinks, and we're not going to just read over it. We're just going to briefly glance over it. Let's just see if it makes any sense. Okay, the first one is the reviews were unusually terrible, which isn't a joke. Like, the reviews were actually incredibly terrible. And this is from critics. You can't say that fans were, just completely getting on here and trying to ruin this movie. That wasn't the case. Look at this. Fan score is actually fairly decent, 80%. It's been holding at 81, 80%. Really all throughout this day. 48% critic rating now. That blows my mind as to why critics decided to pick this particular movie and hate on it. I felt like it was kind of undeserving in a lot of ways. I mean, I picked this movie probably to be, I think I said it was like a 7 to 7.5, somewhere around in that rating for me. Thought it was good. I thought it had some flaws, but it wasn't enough that it caused me to hate this movie by any stretch of imagination. I've now seen it twice, and the second go around, I will admit, I did see more flaws the second go around in it, but overall, it wasn't enough for me to absolutely despise this movie. Now, when you compare this movie to a movie like, I don't know, MCU's Black Widow, I enjoyed the first 30 minutes of that, and then it was just cringeworthy throughout the rest. Um, how critics pan that movie as more of a success, but then hated on Eternals is completely beyond me. Shang-Chi is another one. Shang-Chi was about as generic of a movie as it could come from. I felt like it it didn't even have a great story. It was a decent movie. It was a good popcorn flick, but it didn't really have the makings of a great story within it. I felt like Eternals did have that, but just didn't have time to present it and didn't know which character to necessarily focus on to actually give us the story that really would have made the Eternals something beautiful in a lot of different ways. But as far as these box office reasons, reviews were unusually terrible. Could be. I don't think that really stops very many people. I don't think anybody sits there and looks at Rotten Tomatoes and is like, you know what? Rotten Tomatoes says this movie sucks, so I'm just not going to go see it. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, there would be a lot of good movies that you would miss out on, especially anything with Chris Pratt in it, because they're going to, critics are going to find some reason to hate on anything Chris Pratt related, and he's not necessarily that bad of an actor. But I'm just saying, stuff like Rotten Tomatoes and things. I don't know if the average person actually pays that much attention to anything that they really have to say in a lot of ways, and rightfully so, because they're swayed one way or the other. All right, so I would say that's an maybe on this one particular one. Word of mouth was unusually mixed. Yes, I would actually agree with that. There was a lot of people that I've known that loved it, and then there was a lot of people that absolutely hated it. Um, I personally was kind of in the middle on this one. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it. But if you asked me what I thought of it, I would say it was decent, and it was probably worth going to see if you're an MCU fan. Now, if you're not an MCU fan, I would say pass on that, simply because you're not going to know what's going on. Most MCU fans, unless you're like a hardcore comic fan, don't really know what's going on in it to begin with. So I kind of feel like, yeah, in that regard, I would say definitely pass on it, if you're not an MCU fan. So on that one, totally agree with it. Next one, Eternals was sold as just another MCU movie. Yeah, kind of. I mean, look, Phase 4 has been terrible. Phase 4 definitely has not lived up to previous ones. It definitely hasn't lived up to what people expect from Marvel. Really, this whole phase, whether it be the series or movies, whatever that's come out, have been kind of really middle of the road. They're not spectacular. They're still living off the name of Marvel. They're not doing it on their own, as being something amazing to see. They are just living off what has come before it, not building something new, in a lot of ways. So yeah, I would say in that regard, it was kind of sold as just another MCU movie. I felt like Marvel didn't have very much interest in this movie. I felt like they didn't have very much interest in Shang-Chi. I think they just kind of put that out, those two movies out there for representation's sake. I don't think that they really had any plan of what they were going to do with it. Of course, you're going to have Eternals too, and you're going to have Shang-Chi too. You're going to have all of those, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be heavily backed movies, because look, they didn't have these breakout hit kind of moments, kind of like what a Black Panther did. So you're not going to get Marvel to sell these movies. They're going to look at maybe fan support. Maybe they're going to say, hey, we've got some sort of representation of something, and hey, there'll be a lesbian kiss. this go around. So go see that. It'll be the first one in a MCU movie. It's always a first with them. I don't know what they're going to do when they run out of firsts. But in that regard, I would feel like um, they tried to build this movie up on controversy. They tried to say that fans were basically review bombing it. Then they tried to bring it up on representation, and neither really worked. So I kind of feel like, yeah, this was just another, or the Marvel felt like this was just another MCU movie. They were just trying to make as much money as they possibly could off of it by trying to create a stir. But once that stir didn't happen, I don't think they really was behind it. All right, so it feared unfamiliar characters in generic story. Totally agree with this one. None of these characters were really, none of them stood out in any form or fashion. They all kind of felt like they were based off of another character, a more familiar character. You had the laser beams coming out of Icarus's eyes. You had a lot of Fastos. Was unusually, or not Fastos, but I forget the guy's name. Was really strong. Like the Hulk. You had a lot of characters that kind of had similar powers to more familiar characters. And the story was really generic. It was really cut and dry. We've got a celestial that is going to be, coming out of the earth, and we've got to stop it. When we've all got to get together to do it. So, yeah, it was kind of very generic, and it did kind of feel like, it felt like Marvel didn't know how to change it to make it better. They didn't want to take risks with this movie by any stretch of the imagination, and it showed. And I felt like a lot of fans and critics really called them out on it in a lot of ways. And then, of course, they're going to go with this pandemic thing until they absolutely can't. This is going to be any excuse of how of success, whatever. They're going to find a way to make the pandemic be the reason why something failed. And if something succeeds, they're going to say it was some, glorious win. To be honest, it probably isn't. I don't think the pandemic at this stage is really affecting people. I think if you want to say that anything is probably hurting moviegoers, it's maybe simultaneous releases on streaming services and so forth like that. Felt like that would hurt a movie a lot more and kind of sway the numbers in maybe a more negative direction. So I feel like a lot of these were, some were valid points. I felt like some are just tired things from tired complaints, tired hopes and dreams and reasons of why their movies aren't doing as well and aren't getting the same publicity as what they did in previous movies. And it's simply because, look, you had all your big guns, with Iron Man, Black Widow, Black Panther, Captain America. And then you come out with Eternals and Shang-Chi. And, what do you expect? You're going to have failings when it comes to that. When you're trying to replace those more well-noted characters. So anyways, let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. I will say, it's done middle of the road as far as money wise in the box office, and it was a middle of the road kind of movie. But it does tell something when Forbes is trying to find reasons of why it failed. I think that should tell you about everything that you need to know about this movie, of whether or not it is a success or a failure, they're obviously considering it a failure, or articles like this would not be wrote. But anyways, guys, let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you feel like it was a success? Do you feel like any of these reasons for why it maybe didn't do as well are valid reasons? Or do you feel like this is just old, worn out excuses at this point? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Y'all take care.